So, considering that this is a sequel to a now deemed classic movie that brings back actors from said movie, not just Harrison Ford, but also not the police chief, but the guy with the origami, he comes back.
Oh yeah, Gaff is in it.
Gaff, I
forgot Gaff is in it
very briefly. And obviously this has like callbacks to the original movie. The way that it does things is actually really cool. But now we're kind of in this era of like kind of cynical like nostalgia bait, like for example like the Flash
and stuff.
The Flash movie where it's like
CGIing in old characters.
It's just so heavily reliant on like, oh my god, here's Michael Keaton Batman.
Batman. Star Wars Episode 9.
Yeah.
The same thing.
The same actors.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
And I know this movie came out after The Force Awakens, which did that first, with Harrison Ford again.
Well, he's done that like 100 times since.
Yeah.
He's done it the most.
But do you guys think that that idea of like, like a legacy sequel with like bring back, the actors from those original classic movies, do you think that has kind of outstayed its welcome? Like, do you think that they're just kind of overdone now, or is there any potential for them to be like done well anymore?
Unless it's done like it is in this movie, because this movie does it super well, and the timeline fits too with where it's dated and how old Harrison Ford would be. But like, no, by and large, absolutely not.
I'll give my opinion on this. Is it's gonna be the same thing I say with everything. Is people get too caught up in the fact that it's a sequel or a requel or blah 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 blah. Those are just terms that come up over years. This has been happening the whole time. It's never changed. Movies have always done this, and sometimes they just suck, guys. Like a lot of movies suck, guys. A lot of movies aren't good. That's one of my biggest things for people is like a lot of people get so mad when a movie that comes out that's like a sequel to the one like. Bro, like if they make another Blade Runner and it sucks, I'm just gonna pretend it doesn't exist. Like it's not real. Like it didn't really happen. Like so, I don't have a problem with them making that. Yeah, if it comes out bad, I'm not gonna enjoy it. I don't like them taking advantage of it. I definitely agree with that. When like it's because it's not gonna carry a movie to just bring the actors back. But like, and this is a prime example of it where I think this elevated the original. I don't think necessarily all of them have to be better, but you definitely want to take things from the original and at least improve upon it, or at least change the perspective, or give something new. You obviously can't just do the same thing again.
Actually, have like a reason why you're making it.
Yeah.
Like...
But that goes back to what I was saying. I try all you want. I don't give a fuck. Like everybody gets so upset when someone makes a new sequel of their favorite movie. Who cares, dude? Like, don't care about it then. That's my opinion, is like, just don't watch it if you don't want it to exist. And if you like it, or if you don't like it, then that doesn't matter. The story doesn't change. These stories did not happen. Like, you can change you can consider it any way you want. Like, it doesn't matter.
It was real to me, Nate.
It was real
to me.
But I definitely see why people get upset about it. People just get too caught up in hating on it. And it's like, well, when it's done right, it's great. And that will always happen. And there's been sequels to movies forever. There's been sequels that surpass the original. And most people consider sequels bad. And this is a prime example of that's not always true.
I don't.
In the way to do it right.
I think like
it takes the soul out of the whole endeavor. I think when it's done poorly, it just kind of feels like
why does it take the soul out of it?
Like if you make a shitty sequel and you just bring back Harrison Ford because he'll do it because he wants a paycheck.
Yeah,
and I just won't
this movie, but like
I just won't watch that movie.
If he did like Air Force 1, 2, like,
what if it was the best movie you've ever watched? Like, what if it turned out to be the greatest sequel of all time? It might not, but that's every movie.
Sometimes they want to make a sequel because like the first movie was successful, but like a good sequel is when you have a good story to tell and then you make it
like an actual vision for a sequel. Not just like.
I mean, I definitely agree with that, but I'm just saying, like, but that's what movies. 90% of movies are made for profit. That's That's basically what I mean. And a lot of people do. Like, even when this came out, people were like, they can't do Blade Runner again. It's one of those things I hate, where like people act like it's impossible. Where people say this material is unadaptable. Dude, get over yourself. Like, everything's adaptable in some way or another. It might not everything has to be one for one. you can create that's what I think this does well, is it's not just a recreation, but it definitely references the original, but it is its own story. Like, you could watch this movie by itself and it references the first one, but not so much you couldn't understand what's happening.
But like people's issue, the collective movie-going audience, you know, the issue, like,
But they still go see it all the time anyway. So
I don't know, because like that.
so then they prove themselves wrong.
That Flash
Those
movie
movies-
underperformed pretty significantly.
Yeah, well, that's DC though. That doesn't make sense. Like, that's the bad comparison, because there is plenty of movies that are not great that are just sequels. Like, I would just go right into horror movies. Like, there's fucking Friday 20, and they still made money, but they were not. A lot of them weren't great movies. Some of them were campy
But
and
the
fun.
key though was that movie was like so like heavily reliant on like nostalgia. You know, like that's what I'm like getting at, is that
Actually,
like
didn't mind the new Flash movie. I didn't think it was good, but I was like, hey, you know what? For what this was, pretty okay.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing too. I think people get too caught up on just like I think there is definitely too much nostalgia stuff now, but that's always how that is basically what cinema is in its heart. Like, there's every decade you go back, they make movies about decades prior. Like, that's because the people that are writing movies are older now. Like, that's never changed. It's become more referential because the style of movie has changed. You know what I mean? But nothing has changed in the essence of what is happening. It's just the way they do it is different.
Yeah, it just all comes down to execution. But
now they just shit out more movies.
Because,
that's the thing. Like,
I think my problem with it is that these studios have finite resources, and so much of their money is going to just, you know, regurgitating things that have been done before, that like it seems like creative and new, you know, IPs and stories aren't getting the funding that they used to. Like, I can't think of that many like new creative movies that have came out that were big and successful and pushed.
There's a bit of
once
an issue.
again, if you go back, that's been the problem. Like, that's been said for years.
I know.
There is
if you go back 30 years, they're gonna be like, they're so out of fucking ideas. They're on Freddy 13. Like, it's been the same thing. It's become worse because they make more movies. Like, they just shit out more movies all the time now.
Well, there is also a risk with like actually like starting like a new idea, like a new IP, because you know, like you don't know it's gonna make money. You're kind of going out into the deep end, you know, like from the very get-go, and like it works because like I'm trying to think of like, you know, good example of that, like an actual like successful like completely new idea.
Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's like a great new IP right there.
From
you could It Follows.
I was gonna say, in the smaller scale, I think we are just kind of. I think it exists.
We're too caught up in the big budget
Yeah,
movie too. Is like a lot of what's happening.
Successful new concepts and new ideas aren't really just happening at like the highest, you know, budget area.
You know what's funny?
They're much smaller scale. They're much smaller scale projects.
Horror movies have kind of fallen into that like high concept, new idea type stuff, like with Midsummer, fucking Hereditary and stuff like that, and It Follows, where like that's just kind of the movie that like they want to come up with this new crazy idea type movie. That's just kind of what they fell into because the sequel itis doesn't work for horror movies anymore. But that was their thing back in the day. Like in the 80s was, and like kind of like before that the 90s was when they came up with the self-referential stuff with Scream, and like that's just like what their big thing was. And now their big thing is kind of making the new high concept crazy story movie.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's cheaper to make a horror movie, so like you can get away with making a concept.
Yeah, and it's also it's just very different in like, because it's not like an action movie where you don't need a high budget, obviously,
and you can get away with making like 18 sequels to the same movie by virtue of that, since they're so low budget.
Is a bit of a vacuum. You can kind of get it like
you can make The Conjuring
if you make
9
a horror movie, somebody will watch it. Like,
see, but you say that, but then go look at Fast and the Furious, and it's the same thing. Or there's Marvel. It's like all similar shit. Like,
but those have gigantic
as a streaming service exclusive.
Yeah, but
horror movies.
But my main point was like that kind of started with horror movies. You know what I mean? Like it kind of started there, and then it got popular with everything else, and that's kind of what's happening now. Like, because there's not many other high concept movies coming out, horror movies are kind of pushing it, and now there's other ones starting to show up more like that. Like I said, Everything Everywhere All at Once kind of started being like a high budget. Because who did that? It was just like two directors and like 5 No. Everything Ever All at Once was not the Russo brothers. It was David and David.
The Davids.
Maybe they produced it.
Or the Daniels.
Trust me, it was the Daniels. It was definitely not the Russo brothers, but it was.
I could have swore I heard that somewhere. I'm gonna look it up. Maybe
it was a duo called Dave and Dave or something.
The Daniels.
Dan and Dan or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went super off topic though, but yeah, that's how I feel about that. And I mean, like, obviously, like, you can care, like, you can not like it. I just think people put too much of an emphasis on it. Like, stop going to see these movies then. That's my advice. Like, if you just don't, like, if you don't want them to keep making them, then stop going seeing them. Like, these Marvel movies that suck, stop watching them. Like, they're not, like, just good. Like, I don't need to go see it. I could go watch other movies and give my money to movies that are just better. That's one weird thing. Like, people will only see like the big blockbuster movies, and why? You're missing out on so much.
Well, that's because those smaller scale ones
don't get the same advertisement.
They also don't do as great theatrically. And obviously there are like exceptions.
But that's what I'm saying. Is
I feel like the
See
bigger
those
issue
movies.
is like the fact that like there's like 5 film companies and they own fucking
Oh yeah,
everything.
you're right.
And so it's extremely hard to just make like a new like action film without like getting and to be able to get the funding for it, you know.
Yeah.
Steven
I don't know.
Seagal gets the funding for all of his.
True, yeah.
movies
I think
somehow.
he funds his himself.
he gets those from like a Chinese oil company. But... Well, because yeah, even like Martin Scorsese, you know, who was like this classic, you know, auteur director before his newest movie, like The Irishman, that had to be a Netflix movie. You know, he had to get the funding from Netflix.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Well,
even like a
everything's gonna go
theatrical
into that.
release. And then like his new one, Killers of the Flower Moon, is like a partial digital like Apple release. Like that was funded by Apple. Like so like
Really?
yeah, it was partially in the theaters and then partially on Apple. So like there's clearly even for someone like him, there's
It's hard to get funding.
There's an issue with funding. Yeah.
Well, I think that also goes to the problem with a lot of people don't like movie theaters are hurting actually right now. Like people aren't going to the theaters as much anymore.
COVID definitely.
After that, which is crazy
really
to me
hurt
because
it.
I would be sick to lose the experience of going to the movie theater. I think that is the most fun way to experience a movie when people
Especially
don't
for a
ruin
movie
it.
like this.
Yeah. One of my biggest regrets in life is that I did not see this movie in theaters purely because I was being a dick and didn't want to go with my brother, and I don't know why. I don't even remember. I don't even fucking remember why. He had the ticket. He was like, "Please come." I didn't go. I have no clue.
Well, was that nap worth it, Nate?
No, it wasn't at all. Because I wish I would have watched it. Now I wish I would have went and saw
Was
it.
that the comfiest nap you ever had?
No. I have nightmares about that nap these days.
I had a nightmare during that one. It was awful.
It was like Attack on Titan, bro. I saw the future of me like wanting to watch the movie.
Of you
in theaters.
watching this movie now.
Yeah, and I'm like, no.